Hey, this is Michael Lindsay from Vital MX, and we just wrapped up our 2022 250 Shootout. We're here to do our round table. We got 4 of our 6 test riders, myself and Sean Klinger, who are on staff at Vital MX, Chris Siebenhaar and Willie Simons, who help us out with a lot of these tests. They spent all the days of this shootout with us. We all have our individual notes, our opinions. We have our overall score, and we're going to basically break down each bike based on how they finished and see where we agree, where we disagree, because that's part of it. Ultimately, a shootout is a subjective opinion. There's not really a right or a wrong answer at the end of the day. It's just kind of what we think based on our experience and our thoughts, and that's what we're here to share with you. So there's going to be one of these videos on each motorcycle. Make sure you check out all of them if you're really interested in finding out which bike is best for you this year. Replaying from our 450 shootout. The Husky didn't do great in it. Now, disclaimer ahead of time, yes, the Husky has ended up 6th place in this with a 6.65666 score. Doesn't look great on paper, but I even told test guys, like, hey, it's still not killing it for me, but it was a lot better for me than it was in the 450 shootout. And what we're talking about is the point of contention a little bit with the suspension setup on the Husky. It is 10 millimeters lower front and rear. I'm still a little lost to say the settings are the same, but we've got different linkage and knuckle for it. A few things going on here to accomplish that. I think the pitch to it is, lower center of mass, should make the bike more planted. I think step a little more towards the vets, a little bit more comfortable. And I will say our second day of testing at Paris did at least shine through some of the positive they're talking about. I did find sections of the track. I'm like, man, this thing actually, I see what they're talking about. It is glued to the ground. But even before that, I was going exactly opposite what they did. I'm 5 millimeters higher in sag, and my fork is 5 millimeters far out. So I've split the difference in there. Changed that point. I'm going stiffer. I'm trying to get that ride height up, but I'm still a little lower than the KTM and gas. And I see what we're talking about. From mid-corner to exit, it feels glued to the ground, off cambers, few things like that. It has its positives. For me, the negatives, some of the same as the KTM. I feel like it's really rigid on the front. I've got a little bit lack of feeling. I've done all these other suspension adjustments I'm chasing to get the bike good, and then it has the same linear character as the other Austrian bikes, but with the airbox it has, it's the slowest revving. And again, when I said one of their bikes, that's not a power character that suits me personally. So I was one of the guys that gave it, one of the many of us that gave it 6. And once again, not that it's a bad bike, it's just nothing it does particularly, again, helps things I'm bad at. So it was fun, but it wasn't ultimately what I would take home.
Same. I put it 6. Motor's a little bit slower revving, but it really boils down to the suspension for me. I do feel the suspension was better than it was last year. Last year, I felt the suspension both on the 250 and 450, especially the 450 was really harsh, almost like you were always riding in a hard part of the stroke. The 250 did feel better, and even still this year, I thought it was still better still. I just don't like how low the bike feels. It is nice mid-corner and exit, and in Kia, you have that couple long flat sweepers. It feels very planted. I don't like the feeling going off jumps. It feels like the bike is like still stuck on the ground. Like I may eject off of it. We did go up, I think the same as you, to 100 millimeters of sag from the set 105. It got the back end feeling more lively, because before it just felt kind of dead. You'd go off a jump and the back end would almost fall away. So we went to 100. Just that low feeling, I just typically don't like. It feels very awkward to me.
No, I would very much agree with the dead sense. It was actually funny as there was a section at Kahia that reminded me that as the rear would stick down, the front would kind of float weird, and it was, I would fight it. I'm like, I've tried hitting this jump like 4 different ways, and I really can't, the bike just doesn't pop up and respond how I want to throw it into this next section. It just kind of, not in a bad way, it kind of drives through it, but at times I just felt like I was a passenger a little bit. Like I couldn't get it to be, we use the term lively. I'd say like the Honda and the Cowie are 2 bikes that fall into that category from the very lively bikes that toss around and throw around. The Husky, it was kind of most rewarding when you just tail throttle and just carried momentum. Like, okay, it's planted. I can push through a section. I can cruise, but at the end of the day, maybe I'm thinking about this wrong, but I just don't get that enjoyment out of it in that way. I'm just like kind of riding around, not going through the motions per se.
Yeah, it's hard to sit here and look at that the Husky is getting 6th.
Especially when we gave the gas 2nd.
And I ranked it 1st. I mean, to me, they feel different. But going back to the Husky, last year I didn't have a lot of time with WP air stuff, and I think last year I was just struggling with just the Austrian air forks in general. Now I've spent more time, so I'm kind of know what to expect, know how to set it up. And last year was kind of the same complaint, the 10 mil lower in the forks and then the shock. It's a really, like you guys said, it's a dead feel. And at times it's, when I feel like, all right, we're coming into stuff and it's too low. And it just feels like everything's being packed in. And I'd really noticed it at Kauai, because Kauai is obviously a super fast track. Doesn't get big bumps, more small chatter, and the bike just feels unstable, and you're constantly trying to set it up like its other two brothers, trying to get it up in the stroke. So I had 2 days on it last year, Shootout, and then 2 days here, and I can honestly say those are the only times I've ridden that bike in the stock trim, and it took me 4 consecutive days to finally break through that window. Like you had said, today was the first day where I'm like, okay, there's hope for this bike. And a lot of that is just trying to get the ride height to where it feels more up in the stroke. And the big change that I made was I went a lot stiffer on the high speed on the shock after being, I want to say I was only able to get 97 millimeters for sag, and then I left the bar pressure the standard 10.5. And that's when, Paris today had some pretty deep ruts, and a lot of the ruts you'd come in and you would exit in that same rut. And I was like, man, this thing wants to corner. But it was necessarily coming in. Unless it's getting up in the stroke, it just feels dead. It feels like it packs and it feels unstable. And that's the same feeling that you get when the bike is at speed.
It's crazy. We talk about like all these bikes, really, when you get down to the nitty gritty and start checking measurements and stuff, they're all in a pretty narrow window. So even though we're riding these different bikes, the one bike that is 10 millimeters lower feels like, oh my God, I'm literally about to hit the ground. Why is this so low? It's crazy that all these OEMs have gotten everything so close. Even though we feel nuances, what we're feeling is pretty minor. So when you go a little bit more, like what's on the Husky, it's like, okay, what the heck am I riding now? Is this a 250 motocross bike? Where am I?
And I don't know why. I mean, a lot of the ruts today were deep and you'd exit it, but there was one particular one, and on a lot of the bikes, I kept getting a stand-up motion. A lot of that was set up, and it could be me, but I just felt like I could hit it consistently, and it just wanted to track forward. But the problem is motocross tracks do not stay smooth. They're going to get braking bumps, and with the bike being so low, that's why it just feels like that. I feel like if you have a Husky, work with a suspension guy, get the initial hit maybe a little bit stiffer because the bike is already so low, to get that initial hit just a little bit stiffer. And if you need softer springs, then try it. But I think getting that bike to work with the way how low it is, it could be very, very good with how it corners, but it's just the entry and all the high speed stuff, and can't set a bike up for just one part of the track, I think.
Yeah, for me, the Husky, it's kind of like, it's unfortunate, again, that the Austrian group has 3 choices, because where it puts this bike for me is that if I want comfort, I'd go with the gas. If I want a little bit more racy, I'd go with the KTM. Where does that leave the Husky? In this kind of weird lowered bike zone for me. There's not any time that I was like, hey, I want my dirt bike to be a little bit lower. Also, as a tester, we're riding bikes all the time, and we're used to specific ways that the suspension works. And with the suspension being a little bit lower, being in a different part of the stroke, it's not bad. And if you, again, told me this is the bike you're going to ride all year, I wouldn't be bummed out. I'd figure it out. But it's also, in a shootout, you're riding it back to back with all these other bikes, and it just feels different, and it makes you, not as comfortable. It makes you second guess, where you're going to brake or how you're going to turn. I do agree that it helps it turn. I think it's, a little bit more planted in the corner exit for me was good. But yeah, the other 2 Austrian bikes I just like so much better that I'm kind of like, I don't know what to do with the Husky, because it's still, it makes very similar power, a little bit slower revving, but it's still like, if you get all the way to the top end of the RPM, it's still like a rocket ship. It's still ripping. So faster tracks at Kauai, I liked it a lot. I don't think it was really any slower than the KTM or the gas. Definitely at the very top end, I was hitting the same jumps in the same way. But it's just kind of like, yeah, it gets pushed down by other bikes that do things better.
And there's something about testing all three of them that kind of, to me, it's interesting because I talk about bikes that have their own character, can stand out at times. So let's wipe the sheet. Say the gas and the KTM don't exist. Yep. I would just say, hey, the Husky has a super linear motor. You scream it works well, blah, blah, blah. It's hard, once again, to rate this one well when it's the most expensive of the three. And it's like, I've rode the motor. I'm like, well, the KTM and the gas have the same engine, but I like those better, even though, once again, that's not the character I choose. It's a unique character. If it, once again, if it existed on its own, there wouldn't be as much to compare it to, where now I have the other two sitting there. I'm like, well, I like that about that one better, that one about that one better. I come back to this one, and I go down my checklist, and it's like, what do I like about this one better than the others? Well, nothing really. So I would go buy the gas that's $1,000 cheaper that I really enjoyed riding, instead of buying the Husky and having to do all this stuff to make it like the gas. Yep. Spent more money in the first place and then spent more money to get it to the bike that was cheaper. Thank you for joining us for another roundtable. Like I said at the beginning, there is multiple of these, one for every single motorcycle, whichever one you've just watched. If you want to learn about the next most interesting bike, make sure you hit our video playlist, look around. There's plenty of them in there. If you want to check out our full detailed article, dyno charts, weights, all the stuff you want to read through, that's on our site at vitalmx.com. The link is in the bio below. And once again, if you like what we do here, please subscribe, hit like. It really helps us, and we get to keep cranking out great content like this.